friends. Today I'm here to talk to you about 3 mistakes that you're making about boundaries. So before we dive in, stay to the end and you'll get a bonus tip on how to stop feeling guilty about boundaries. Is anyone in for that? Pop a yes below. And hit like, hit subscribe, get the notifications for these videos so that you can keep hearing about all these awesome topics that I'm talking about. So let's talk about boundaries and why they matter. Boundaries matter because really everybody needs them. Kids need them, adults need them, and that when we set boundaries, we actually have more space to be clear and to get connected into yourself and what you're trying to do, and so that you can be clear on your purpose and really live into your next steps with bravery. And if you don't have boundaries, you're going to have a tough time in general doing this. So this one is really specifically around work, so that you can get clear on like how to set boundaries at work and to learn the mistakes you're making so that you can make a change for yourself and start to set boundaries with great clarity and have a more spacious work-life balance and have more space and time for yourself. Okay, you guys ready? Let's go. So the first mistake you're making around boundaries is you have a lack of clarity around your boundaries. You don't really know what they are. You don't understand if it's okay or not okay for someone to be texting you at night, or even if people should be texting you at all on your phone around work, around the times you check your email, the times that you're okay with it, whether you're taking a lunch break, whether you're taking time to move your body in the middle of the day. Sometimes what's happening is like if you have no clarity around your boundaries, you're going to really struggle to set them. This happened with one of my clients, that she wasn't really moving her body and she was actually working really early every morning until she realized that she actually had space and time in her schedule to move her body and then start her meetings at 10 a.m. every day. And once she saw that and realized that, she actually could set that boundary in her schedule, and she started to move and feel a lot more connected to herself every day. So if you don't have clarity around what your boundaries are, it's impossible for you to actually set and enforce them and actually sustain them on a regular basis. So the first step is for you to get clarity. What is it that you want around boundaries with work? When do you work? When do you not work? How can people communicate with you? So that's the first thing, is for you to get really clear for yourself what boundaries are okay and where you want to set them for yourself around your work environment. All right. The second mistake that people make around boundaries is that you forget that boundaries are kind. And they're kind. They're a kindness to yourself as well as to other people. When you set clear boundaries, people have a lot easier time understanding and knowing when to communicate with you, when to reach out to you, when it's not okay, when they actually have to hold what it is that's going on. So for example, if you have a team and you have people who really want answers from you all the time, and they're always texting you or messaging you late at night with some kind of crisis, if you have really clear boundaries, like you don't respond to your emails after 6 p.m., for example, I personally said it earlier, but you could be 6 p.m., and then what happens is they actually have to assess and address what the situation is, and they might actually be able to resolve it on their own without you. So this is an important thing for you to understand. If you're overgiving with people because you have no boundaries, and then what's happening is you're not actually supporting your team or your boss or whoever it is that you're interacting with to resolve things on their own. So the more you set boundaries, the more you'll actually be creating space for people to start to understand and get clear for themselves what's really going on, and not have you be the emergency person for everything. And if you are the emergency person for everything, let me know below. And then also, make a change. How can you start to set boundaries and not be that person? And also remembering that your productivity has nothing to do with your value and your worth. And that's a conversation for another time. But today is to remember, boundaries are kind. Boundaries help everybody, including yourself. This is how you're going to have time to move your body, to feel connected to yourself, and to prioritize yourself. So setting boundaries really is a foundational element of getting clear and connected to yourself. Okay, number 3. This is the third one. And this is the mistake most people don't even realize that they're doing, is that they can be too rigid about their boundaries. And you're like, what, Nicole? That's impossible. How can I be too rigid about your boundaries? Well, you can be too rigid. You can say, I only work from these times. I never talk to anybody outside of this container. And then don't you interfere with the things that I'm doing. Stop right there. And there's that harshness, and there's a rigidity, and there's actually a reaction. So notice if you're going into reaction around your boundaries and you're saying, oh my goodness, never. And like everything is always a no. So the sign that you're too rigid is that literally everything is a no. You're not the person who needs to understand that no is a complete sentence. You're the person who's constantly saying no all the time. And when you're in that situation, noticing when you're being too rigid is important. Can you notice when you're being in reaction to something versus saying, oh, let me take a pause. Let me pause and see how I really feel about the situation. Is this actually an easy request that will just take me 10 seconds to handle versus being rigid and angry and being like, I need to enforce my boundaries with this person. So notice if you get that like angry face about your boundaries, and instead, can you soften a little bit and say, okay, let me really be clear on what my boundaries are and then move from there. All right. Here's my bonus tip. Here's the last one, just how to not feel guilty around boundaries. Are you ready for this one? This one is a little bit of a mind bender and a really cool one. If you're feeling guilty about boundaries, it's typically because somebody else is guilt tripping you, right? I know, isn't that crazy that actually what's going on is somebody is guilt tripping you about your boundaries. So what happens if you feel guilty about boundaries? This is a really great time to take a look at the relationship, to take a look at what's going on with the other person so that you can start to say, oh, they're guilt tripping me, but I get to have my own boundaries. I don't have to feel guilty about my boundaries. I can actually start to have nice, clear boundaries for myself. So you might wonder, Nicole, what if it's my boss? What if it's my team? Totally understandable. And then you might have to have a conversation with them and tell them your boundaries and explain really clearly what they are and why you've set them that way. So perhaps it's a deeper conversation with that person. The first thing to remember, though, is to notice if they're guilt tripping you. And then if that is happening, to then start to say, okay, what are the steps that I can take to start to alleviate that relationship and the stress around boundaries in that relationship rather than feeling guilty. Feeling guilty short circuits your brain. Feeling guilty crashes your mind. You don't want really to live with guilt. So if guilt is happening, use it as a signal for something to change, something to be different for yourself, to have a conversation, to really support the boundaries that you're creating for yourself and structuring in your life. Okay, if this resonated, drop a yes below for beautiful boundaries. I'm so excited you're here. Hit like, subscribe. More information coming to you all the time here. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you soon.